Today I am thrilled to bring you something I've been working on for quite a while now. So just because I haven't been posting videos doesn't mean I haven't been busy. And what I've got to show for you today is a game. Well, it's a prototype of a game. And it can actually be found online, and I will link to this. And yes, this is like an auto-battler, well, a prototype for an auto-battler in a universe that my friends and I have been working on for many years. So the idea is that you build up your squad. So, you have cash, which is money, and you have various units you can buy. So you can buy a unit, and then you go on to battle. And there are 10 rounds, and if you win a round, you progress to the next one, and if you lose a round, well, your health at the top goes down, and you'll see that happen. So you also can buy different slots. So, at the moment I can only buy these 3, but I can unlock some more ones. If I go to this next battle, I'm going to lose it for sure, because they are way more powerful. And you see the health goes down. So that's the game. You win if you get past the 10th level, and you lose if you run out of health, basically. So this is what I'm excited to show off, because I think there's a lot of really interesting things about it that you might be able to, or people might be able to learn from, which is a slightly different turn from what my normal videos, which are people requesting things, and I try and come up with the answers. Now, a video I'm going to release in tandem with this is this one. It's a specific introduction to JavaScript for this Trial by Fire tutorial, and that's the name of the game, Trial by Fire. So you don't need code to make games in GDevelop, but I used it quite extensively in this game in order to do some of the stuff I wanted to do. And so if you're not sure what JavaScript is, if you feel uncomfortable with code, there's going to be a fairly lengthy video released that will give you a very quick primer, just enough to understand and to feel comfortable looking at it, and so that if you want to download this game and make changes and tweak it and learn how it works, you at least feel comfortable with doing that, and it's not just fishing in the dark with a bunch of characters that don't make any sense. So without further ado, let's go on to the game. We have 2 scenes. We have our setup scene, and we have our battle scene. Setup and battle events are quite minimal. There's some stuff that happens there, but most of the functionality is actually in these 2 behaviors, also named setup and battle. And basically, almost everything you see in the scene has a behavior associated with it. So, there's a text thing called cache display. Well, if you go into the setup behavior, there should be something similar there. Yeah, there you go. It's not called cache display, but I'm not perfect. That's a behavior that interacts with it. So that's the general setup of how it works. Almost everything has a behavior with it that dictates how it functions. Now let's sort of run through how this is all put together. So under global variables, there is a couple of global variables. Setup data, which contains JSON, and if you don't know what JSON is, I recommend you either search online or you watch the video, the coding video, because I explain what JSON is and I explain how to read it and interpret it. But setup data is a global variable that holds what units the player has purchased and where they are. Cache is obviously how much money there is. Column owned, well, in this game you can buy extra spaces. Player health is how much they start with. Player health, is how much they have now. Player health max is how much they start with. Round is what round they're up to. And this really big blob, so big that it takes a second for it to load, called round data, is actually where I specify what enemies should appear on each round. So as you can see here, in round 1 there's 1 unit, which is a sniper, and it's in column 0, row 0, whereas in unit 4, you have 3 soldiers. Units 5, you've got a zombie, a soldier, and a sniper. And so this is where I keep all of this data. In addition, there is also a bunch of scene data, scene properties. So you can see that I keep track of which slot is selected in a scene property. If it wasn't obvious, the difference between global and scene is, global can be accessed from anywhere, and so I use global for information that needs to be shared. So, both the setup and the battle scene need to know where the player has put their units, but the battle scene doesn't care, which slot the player has selected, or how much a soldier costs, or a zombie costs, or how much columns cost. And so yeah, the reason I did this like this is because I wanted it to be easily modifiable. I didn't want to have to keep changing too many variables. So if I change this to 20, a couple of things happen. So when I run the game, so not only does it update the text of this to 20 because it's a scene variable, I can access it from many behaviors, but it also, if I try and select it, the game knows that I don't have enough cache for it, so it won't let me do it. Also, you can sell units. So if I buy a unit, I have 0 cash. If I sell it, I get 1 back. Yeah, it knows how much the unit costs how much it should refund. So I've tried to make it as sort of programmatically dynamic, and I try to make it as dynamic as possible. And what that means is everything reacts from data. So it's not that if I want to make a change, I should go into the object here and be able to select it here. Ideally, as much as possible, I should be able to just change data at a source, like a configuration, and then it all changes. So the way the scene is built up is that we've got 3 layers. Your base layer, which is your ready button and all your slots. There is a shop layer, which shows icons for a unit. It shows text for its name. It also dynamically shows its cost. And you also have this thing called a buy area. Basically, I needed the player to be able to click anywhere around there, because that's what players expect. You can click somewhere around there in order to buy the unit. And so I created this empty area. It contains an instance variable called unit. And so when you click on that, it basically says, buy me this unit that I've named out. And yeah, so that's how it works. There's also an X. I hastily threw together an X button just as a way to hide the UI. Ignore that. And then finally we have our unit layer, which, and this is all, again, dynamically generated. So there's an image here, but depending on which image is selected, which unit is selected, when you click on it, it automatically changes out for the right one. Names also. So I don't think I demoed this, but so I've got my unit, I win the first round, and I think I'll spend my 2 cash as a reward on a zombie. So I'm going to buy a zombie, and so when I click between these two, it's the exact same layer, but the image and the text change dynamically depending on what's selected. And of course, if I select a slot that doesn't have anything active, it hides that layer and goes back to the shop layer. So you can see all of that happening here. So for example, slot has a bunch of conditions. Now, if I've grouped it with, if you see a group like this, it's because of code underneath. And once again, if you're not familiar with JavaScript, or this is all looking very confusing and scary, don't feel panicked. You can watch the other video or just start playing around with it. I will link also below to the GDevelop sort of JavaScript documentation. But the great thing about GDevelop is that because it runs in a web engine, like all of this editor, this is all actually running in JavaScript. What's great about that is if you need to find out more, you can actually do it in-game very easily. So you might be like, well, what's runtime schema, and how do you know what get variables is and what's get layer? I also did some quite perhaps cheeky stuff to do with where is it? So that's about getting variables. Linked objects manager. You see this? So GDevelop has a feature called link objects, and you can see the actions for it, but in the editor. But you don't really get any documentation on it. Well, this is kind of what I wanted. For example, like spawn saved unit. So you can see I've got a thing that gets my setup data. It finds the right columns. It does some error checking. It creates a unit based off the unit name. It moves it over to the right place, and then it links it to the slot. And what that lets me do is later, if a slot's selected, I can find the unit it's linked to. But as I said, this isn't documented, so how do I find it out? Well, if you start running your game, now on Mac it's Control-Option-I, on Windows, blimey, it's been a while since I used a Windows computer, I'm not sure what it is. but you basically open the developer tools. Maybe you've seen this before, maybe you haven't, but one of the grand things about it is, well, it's actually the game. You can log out and see what's happening. Now, what does that mean? So, what that meant is, when I was trying to find out what Linked Objects Manager did, what I would do is, I would say console.log. If you don't understand what that is, that's basically me saying, please print this out to the developer's console. And I'm passing in a runtime scene. And so what I can do is, I can run, and when I select something, what does it take for it to come up? Spawn a saved unit. Okay. So this will trigger once we come back from setup. Okay. Well, my fault for putting it in the wrong place, but let's just run through the first level again. Play some happy elevator music whilst you're waiting. Cool. So console.log has caused this line to come up, and this line is a runtime scene. And so what we can actually do from the editor is we can actually look into it, and we can see what runtime scene actually has on it. And you can see this is how I discovered Linked Objects Manager, and I can start like delving into, what does it mean? How do we use it? The other great thing about the editor tool is, I don't know if you've ever had the slightly frustrating problem where you've set up an action incorrectly, and you try to play the game, and GDevelop just doesn't open. It just stays at a blank screen. You know you've done something wrong, but it's not telling you what. Well, if you go to into this developer console, it will actually have an error that clearly says you've got an undefined action. It will tell you exactly what's going wrong. So it's really, really useful. And so, for example, for something like the Linked Objects Manager, how did I know that? So I knew it existed, and how did I know I could link objects on it? Because, if I click down here, it just says links. Well, the trick is this thing called proto. Now, I'm not going to get into the sort of how proto works, but if you open it up, you see all of the methods, or all of the code you can call on it. And here you can see get objects linked with, which, the name quite helpfully tells you find objects linked with some object you pass in. But you also have another one called link objects, and you pass in two objects, and as you might guess, just from the name, it links them behind the scenes, and so you can then retrieve them later. And so this is kind of how development went. If I needed to do something in code because I needed to have extra functionality that I just couldn't do easily through sort of regular GDevelop actions, and I'd point out I didn't use code for everything. Remember, you look up at this. I use GDevelop actions wherever it's sensible, and I use a bit of code whenever I absolutely need to. But yeah, this is sort of how it went. If it wasn't documented on the GDevelop JavaScript documentation, I would basically just poke through the code. I would start logging out. Don't know where it's gone. I'd start logging out different objects. I'd start looking at the methods on them. So by clicking through the proto, and that would allow me to pick through and start working out what I could use. So yeah, so this is all of the setup behavior, and it's fairly well commented. I explained in the coding tutorial, but if you see these two forward slashes, it basically means whatever follows is just literally an English phrase. It's me writing a comment to whoever's reading it. So it's fairly well commented what everything does, and if you find it an interesting learning experience, you can pick through and try and understand how it works. And so that's the setup page. And yeah, the actual events are all initialization. So hide all the UI layers, initiate the Linked Objects Manager. So specifically, that sort of feature that I told you before, I've discovered that it only appears once an object's actually been linked from code. It doesn't exist there beforehand. This is just how GDevelop works behind the scenes, and so what I do at the start of the scene, I create an object, I unlink everything from it, which doesn't exist, but it has the purpose of initializing it, and then delete it. spawn units from last setup, and set up the column cost. It's actually quite minimal in the events thing, which is quite good. If we go to battle, things are similar. So you have a bunch of objects here. Slots are these individual layers. Slots are these individual objects, and I use them basically as placeholders. I will put when I generate the battle scene, I basically put units on top of them. This health bar is actually 2 health bars. It's a red and a green one. And what I do is I shrink the health bar by, well, I shrink it to whatever the new value is. So you basically see this red health start to appear. What's also interesting about it is I lerp it. What does lerp mean? So, for example, is battle, where is it? Player health bar. Health bar. There we go. So when a health bar, so if your player loses a battle, this gets called, and what it does is it basically there's an equation at play here, and this is the equation. I've called it interpolated value, but basically what it does is it says you call this function. It basically in the main loop, you call it all the time, and what it does is it says, take my health from what it is now, take the width of the bar from what it is now, and shrink it towards what I want it to be. And I also do this for the units as well. So for example, each hero, each unit, has a health bar linked to it, and whenever every frame, we basically say, what is the hero's health? We work out sort of the percentage of the health bar, and then we slowly shrink the green bit of the health bar to match what it should be. And so what that gives us is, so if you notice when we go to the battle, let me close this, so if I create my sniper, so you see that the green health bars, they don't just jump to where they're going to be, they sort of like slide over. And so one of the effects, and so for example, I've got it as T 0.9, if I put it as 0.3, that slide will be, I can't remember, is it going to be faster or slower? It's going to be one of those, possibly way faster. There we go. So you see how much faster that jumps. So putting a 0.9 is sort of like a nice gradual, it shows you things are going down. What's also interesting is that, well, you can see units have health bars, but there is no such thing as a unit health bar here. In fact, there is just a single white square called health bar. Well, yeah, maybe you've already cottoned onto it, but that's exactly what I'm doing. When I spawn a hero, so on created, what I just said it's health, if it's the beginning of the scene, I create my health bars. And what I do is I create one of those white boxes, I color it red, and I position it underneath the hero. I then create another one, color it green, position it under the hero, and then I link the green one. And so that allows me to, in the health bar script, because remember, as far as the health bar is concerned, it is just a single object. It doesn't know that it's attached to a hero. It doesn't know what that hero's health is meant to be. But by using this linked objects manager, it allows me to find the health bar attached to that hero, and then shrink it based off that hero's current health and max health. Slots can be used to spawn friendlies and spawn enemies. There's a round counter and a couple of help methods for, is the game is the game lost, transition to setup. I think this battle event scene could be a little neater, setting up the health bar, some of these are quite easy, are quite straightforward. How's the game won? This sort of code for how the battle is finished is a little more complicated than I think I'd like it to be, but it nonetheless works, and it's where I want it to be for this prototype. And this, what it does is it checks with these custom conditions I made if the battle is over, update the player health bar, transition to the setup screen, or if it's been won, show the win screen. Oh yeah, so there is a win and a lose screen. So the win screen says you've made it, the Horde send their regards, and the lose screen says it's all over, return to minus, your services are no longer required. What is the Horde? What is minus? What is this? Well, as I said, this is meant to be a prototype for a fantasy world my friends and I have made, and This game is going forward. I'm going to be actively developing on this, and the game's going to the world will come into it way more. But that was just sort of my attempt to put a couple of features of the world into this very small prototype. So yeah, win, lose screen. And if you lose, I just decided that the player takes 1 damage for each enemy unit alive. The sort of the beating heart of the battle scene is this. It's this game tick. So I don't know how familiar you are with auto battlers, but the point is that the game is about you building up your squad, positioning them, upgrading them, making choices around composition, but then the actual battle just happens on its own. So you don't actually control, how the battle goes. You don't actually control who attacks what or when or why. The game is you do the setup and the game plays itself. And so at the beating heart of this battle scene is this tick, and I think this was the first thing I came up with. The idea is that there is a scene variable. So if I go to the battle scene variables, you see that there's a couple, and there's particularly this tick one. I'll explain all of these in a bit. But you have this tick variable, and every frame it's set to false. However, we create a timer called tick, and if it's greater than a third of than 0.3 seconds, or when the number of heroes ready is when all the heroes are ready to move on to the next tick, we reset the timer and we set the scene variable to true. Because this is called every single frame, it means that true will only be this tick scene variable will only ever be overwritten to true exactly for 1 frame. So we overwrite it to true for 1 frame, and if we go into our hero behavior, we have a method here that says so long as the hero has some health, if the scene variable is true, run its turn. And then what running turn does is it adds speed. It decides if it's going to attack. If it is going to attack, then it deals damage, and it plays an animation. And basically, once the animation if an animation is played, we wait for it to be finished, and then we say that okay, this hero is ready for this next turn. And so that's sort of how the beating heart of it works. You've got this steady tick that takes. If no units attacking, it takes 0.3 seconds. If units are attacking, it basically waits for the animations to finish. So it allows me to have this. It allows there to be a constant tick of events going on, and each unit is responsible for doing something on itself. So either it just waits, or it plays an animation, or it dies. If it's been damaged too much, and then it says it's ready to go on to the next turn, and then it plays. Now it's kind of, I suppose it is a. I guess that worked. It is a bit of it doesn't really show it off properly because these are all, by the way, free sprites and animations from Kennedy. It doesn't really show off how it works properly, but basically because all the animations are basically the same duration, they all have the same kind of length of punching or kicking or whatever. But if for example a unit had a really long cool animation because of a special attack, this current setup would wait for that special attack animation to finish before all the units go on again. So it ensures that everything happens in a lockstep. Sort of on that. So all of these characters, so all of these objects, zombie, soldier, sniper, they all have a behavior called hero, and hero has a couple of fields. It has a target pattern, damage it deals on the attack, starting health, and ticks per attack, so sort of speed. And this is sort of the balancing. This is the balancing property. So you can. This is the behavior. This is where the fields are given, and the most interesting one of it is attack target and pattern. What's an attack pattern? Well, I probably should have explained it earlier, but all these units are not equal. Snipers are like glass cannons. sorry, let's start with soldiers. Soldiers are the basic ones. Soldiers have a medium amount of health, a fair amount of damage, and they attack the closest unit to it. Zombies, they have quite a lot of health. They don't do much damage, but they attack an entire column. So, if there's 3 units here and a zombie attacks, it will deal damage to all 3 at once. A sniper is the glass cannon. It has very little health, but it does quite a fair bit of damage, and it does it to 2 units. It deals damage to some front unit and a unit behind it. So it's a piercing. It does a piercing attack. And so I'm not strictly happy with how I've set this up, and I think as I go forward I will rejig this a bit. But what that means is in deal damage. So what happens is you find all the enemies, and you basically work out, you sort all of the enemies, and then you work out what you want to be damaged. So we basically grab this argument target. So we basically say, I do believe target comes from sort of the attack pattern, and what that lets us do is say, well, if we said it's a single target, we just literally put the first, we can say, I mean, the point of all of this is how I've currently implemented different targeting patterns. So, a single target will damage the first enemy, a splash, as I've called it, will grab all units from the same column and attack all of them, whereas a Pyrrhus actually finds a unit that's in the row behind it, just behind it, and then attacks those, and then deals damage. And this is the logic of how it works. This video has already gone on for quite a while, and I'm sure I've rambled for most of it, and I've probably managed to not cover some very important parts. I can't really think what they would be though. So there you go. This is something I spent like a week and a bit working on. I showed it to my friends, they played it and they had good fun, and hey, if you want to play it and give it a try, tell me if you can actually beat it, because I'm not sure it's possible to beat it. Maybe it is. Maybe the balance is completely off and you'll tell me that actually no, 3 soldiers and a sniper is OP. That's cool. You're totally entitled to do that. But yeah, hopefully I'll be getting out more GDevelop tutorials. I've got one more game that I've been working on that I'm quite excited to show. And that one's much simpler. This is by far the most complex thing I've ever done in GDevelop. Certainly like the most involved thing I've done with coding in GDevelop, and it's taught me a lot. And maybe it'll be useful to you too. So with that, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you at the next one. Oh, and of course, shout out goes out to all the viewers and all the people who comment on the videos, because honestly, yeah, it's been a really big support. The fact that I haven't been putting out videos for an obscene amount of time, and people have still been watching it, people have still been commenting, having requests, giving feedback. I really appreciate that, because it tells me that there are people that want to see what I'm doing, and that gives me the motivation to, well, keep thinking about it and keep thinking about what videos I want to make. Anyway, now I really will see you at the next one, and have a good day.